Ah, hello. Welcome to Burford Road, in episode 2 of my OO9 build. I haven't got this far in this episode, that's a later episode. However, in this one, I'm going to lay the track and build this mountain. Come have a look. So with the bridges now built and ready to be correctly installed, they're both loosely positioned at the moment, I can now concentrate on the back of the layout and build the fiddle yard. Now the fiddle yard is going to be built on foam board. The foam board is a great material for small N-gauge or OO9 layouts because it's lightweight, inexpensive. You could build the whole layout with this if you wanted. I just wanted something a bit sturdier. I have used foam board to build a layout previously. I could probably show you a couple of images of it now. This is my old OO9 layout. So I made some foam board risers just to hold it up, and there's obviously this empty space here. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to probably make some drawers just to store ideally locos and the trains. So you can store them in a drawer underneath, and it makes the layout more compact and tidy. If this will work, that's another question, but that's the idea of how, and that's what I'm going to go with.
But it didn't work. In fact, the space between the risers was too vast, and when the top layer was applied, there was too much flexibility to properly support the track.
Currently wedging the board down to try and glue it. There was too much flexibility. Still, let me just show you there. It's not as bad now, but it was flexing too much. There wasn't enough strength there, so I've added some extra formers. It's unfortunate. It would have been nice just to have a little drawer system underneath. If I'd made it with wood, that would have worked quite well, but then again, that would have then been a compensation for the weight and would have made it a lot heavier. So you can see I've painted it green as well. Now this is to stop the, I haven't done it with these ones, but they're going to be covered inside. But this is to stop moisture getting into the foam board, because foam board does have a tendency to warp. That's the reason why I've got these weights on top of this one, because I have painted it underneath and it did warp when painting, so it's currently being pinned down whilst the glue cures.
While that was left to dry, I moved on to other issues.
Now obviously one of the issues with the layout is I've got these great big gaping holes where the point motors are going to go. So to cover it, I just cut up a strip of card. So there's an example here. And you cut the holes for the point motor, sit it on top of the point motor, and then put your point on top, as demonstrated here with these two. There you go. And then that'll stop a big pile of ballast just falling down that giant chasm. So the point motors are now all sorted. I've got this card template sitting over the top to block the holes where they're going to go. They're all wired up and they're running through the bottom of the board. I've also now pre-wired the track. Now I'm not going to be DCC on this one, not for the moment anyway. I might do it later on. So I'm going to do analog, so I'm going to need some isolating sections. Or ideally I want power in the loop whilst I can still shunt the sidings here. So I've got a power section on this piece of track which will go on the outer loop, and then I've wired up the inner loop. It's just off camera there. I'm not going to put a cork base on this because it's a lightly laid track, and the cork base, I know it's quite good for sound deadening properties, but it's sitting on this foam anyway, so that should be suitable enough as it is. And I don't want the shoulder of ballast too high. I want it to look like a lightly laid track. So I'm going to use my usual method of sticking it down with copy decks. I find that is the best way of laying track. No unsightly pins or anything like that going through the sleepers. Although I have used set track for this sort of section. I bought one of those Pico set track starter packs just to sort of have something to start with. In hindsight, I probably just bought a loop and a points because I've ended up not using half the pack and it was quite expensive. So, but there we are, live and learn. So I'm going to glue this track down, I'm going to feed the wires through, and then hopefully I might be able to run a train.
But that was going to be easier said than done.
I've realised what's from this is an absolute mess around here. Actually, the whole room is an absolute mess, but I think everyone's layout room looks like this when you're in the middle of a project, or in my case, 2 projects. But this one's sort of on the back burner at the moment. I just want to build something and watch some trains go around in some scenery, and then I'm going to move back onto this because this is quite a big project. And I'll be honest, I ran out of steam on it, and I've sort of just I'm going to leave it until I feel up to making, working on it again. So. But what I was going to discuss here was, as I said, I want a isolated section for the loops. But to do that, you're going to have to remove the fish plates off the points. Now this is sort of more of a warning to anyone else who's got these points, because if you want to do this, you're going to have to just destroy the fish plate to get it off. That's the camera there. It's picking it, not picking it up, but these will not come off. I don't know why they are different to. I've never had it with any other Pico product before. They're a bit like the Hornby fish plates, so they've got the little bump just underneath that sort of holds them in so they don't come out, which is great and all. But when you can't remove the things, you end up pulling the rail out, as I did on one of these sets of points. So the whole rail came with the fish plate, which wasn't very good. I managed to put it back in. But that's just a warning for anyone who is trying to remove these fish plates and put the plastic ones on. Just be careful and just be aware that basically you're just going to have to get a pair of pliers and twist them off. You aren't going to be able to pull them off. So I started laying the track, and as I mentioned, I was using set track. But for this outer loop here, I use Streamline. And now that the glue's dried, I've come back to look at it, the set track loop just doesn't look right. Because this one flows with a nice curve, and this has just got the the problem that is with set track. It's just got these really sharp turns here, straight line there. It doesn't look right compared to the outer curve. So up that track comes, and we're going to relay and put some streamline. So we are relay the curve with streamline. And I've got to say, that looks a lot better than the sharp turns of the set track.
At last the track was down, and I thought I'd celebrate by running my Scar Lowy locomotive around the layout. Whilst he ran like a dream, the rest of the fleet, i.e. my other loco, wasn't really up for playing ball.
So I was very pleased with myself. Thought I got all the track down. Tested it with Scar Lowy, and he ran beautifully around the track. Except at this set of points here, but it's not a engine's fault. It's some of these points, as you can see, I've dug them up. I've had them up twice now, and for some reason they will work when I test the point motor outside of the layout, but as soon as I put it back in the scenery, just don't want to go. I have no idea what that's about, but it also means that this point blade isn't touching this rail here, so whenever a train comes in there, it stalls, bizarrely. Although if I do that, it jolts it and it gets it moving again. But the big problem is Stanley. We've given him the name Stanley because I told my boy that there was an engine called Stanley on the Mid-Solder Railway who was a Baldwin, and that name seems to have stuck. Unfortunately, he doesn't like any transition from these curve points into set streamline track.
This was clearly a problem.
So I've had to pull up the loop, and I'm starting to relay and then testing the curvature to make sure that it goes the right way, and help. And you will run along the track without derailing. So there we are. I have now relayed the loop, and Stanley, as we like to call him, runs perfectly through it. Next problem I have are these frogs, because Stanley does not like them.
It was yet another problem for the layout.
His wheelbase is just a fraction too short, and he stalls. Which is very annoying because I've used 3 of these points.
To get round the problem of stalling, I decided to remove a small amount of the plastic frog from the point and fill the gap with a very small amount of solder. This seemed to bridge the gap and solve the problem. When I test ran, Stanley ran through the points nice and smoothly.
Yeah, it passes over the points nicely. I tried doing the same on this end, where I just had a little bit of solder to the rail. Unfortunately, the soldering iron wasn't playing ball for some reason. It wouldn't melt the solder correctly. It just kept balling and basically melting these check rails and joining the 2 rails here. So I took all the solder off. I cut away the melted plastic rail, and then I've just taken a little bit of rail, filed it down a bit, sunk it in the gap, soldered it to the join there. It's super glued in place, and I've added a little bit of plastic here just to cover up this area here where I've accidentally melted this bit of rail. And as I can demonstrate, I ran it the right way. Now pass it over at nice slow speed without stalling. So here we are, I've ironed out the kinks on the track. I've replaced this road here. And I've removed this set of points here. I didn't think I needed them in the end. I was having issue with this point. It turned out that this point blade here needed to be pressed down just a fraction of a millimetre to get electrical connectivity. I know you shouldn't really rely on point blades, and that's one of the reasons. So I don't know if you can see it. I put a very small amount of solder on there just to bridge between the rail and the point blade. And that seems to solve the problem there of connectivity. Again, this track here, the Baldwin did like to derail, so just sort of pulled it across a bit just to glue it in place. So the only thing left to sort out now is this set of points here. They're an absolute nuisance. They're right in the middle of everything. I've had them out once already, changed it around, can't get them to work properly. So I've gone to the extreme. I bought a new set of points, a new point motor. I'm going to take the track up, put the new point motor in, and hopefully this will solve the problem.
But hope wasn't my friend, and this wasn't going to go the way I planned.
Now, as I said, I bought a new set of points and point motor to try and deal with the middle point on the track bed at the sidings, as the point wasn't throwing. I've tried putting the new point in, thinking that it will work straight away. However, if I just demonstrate, it won't throw one way. Put the point this way. I'm going to demonstrate now it's not throwing either way. There, it throws that way, but it won't throw back. Just does that. And I found out that I had the same problem. This set of points just here, they're just slightly out of shot on the main running line. And they originally, when they were tested, they worked, and when it's gone in, one side doesn't work. And what I found was that the spring in the points, just in there's a very, very small wire spring, is too tight. There's too much tension for the point motor to throw the point over. So I'm showing this point motor here. I've got some pliers and just squashed the spring to just make it slightly smaller. And now, press the right button, the points throw without any problem. So this appears to be the same problem with the other set of points. So I'm now going to have to pull them apart to fix. To do this, there's a small plate. I'll just show it on here. This small plate here. You can bend it back. I think it might be possible to remove. I couldn't get it to remove. There's obviously 2 lugs here. But you can just bend this plate back, pull the spring out. It's a very fiddly job. And I did drop the spring of this one on the floor. Did manage to find it. and I tested, they are magnetic. So if you do lose them on the floor, you could just run a magnet over the floor to try and find the missing wire. Anyway, so you can bend the plate back, take the spring out, squeeze it with some pliers just to make it slightly smaller, take some of that tension off, and then reassemble, and then hopefully that should solve the problem of the points that don't throw. So after, I think there's 4 or 5 times this track's come up now to try and sort this problem out, I finally can do this. An exhausting task, but at least I got there in the end. So if you do have that problem, that you're putting your points on and they're not firing, just check the point springs. They're maybe just a little bit too tight.
But the model railway gremlins hadn't quite given up on my layout.
So I've come back in here this morning to see how the layout is now that the glue's dried. They've tested around the loco, and unfortunately it still stalls when these points are swung this way and these points are swung this way. It seems to be a lack of connectivity between the point blade and the rail, which is unusual because these points are brand new. The other issue is that this point blade's popped out and I can't get the bugger back in. And then thirdly, what's more bizarrely, is that this layout is electrocuting me. Every time I touch it, I'm getting a small shock. Now, I've pulled the power out and that stopped happening, so I can only conclude that the point motors are sending a small current through the insulation board, and every time I touch it, I'm getting an electric shock. So I'm now going to have to pull the track up again, insulate in the where the point motors are, and try and fix that point blade, and try and work out why they will not work when swung in that position. Sometimes I don't know why I bother building a layout.
But this time, I was determined not to give up on this build.
So I've had a couple of days away from the layout. I've come back to it sort of fresh face, just to have another look at the issues with this layout. So firstly, I pulled the track up again. It's probably the 6th time these points have come up now. I've insulated in these pockets here. When I run my finger on here, I don't feel like I'm getting electrocuted. I'm not quite sure why there was power running through there, because the only supply was coming off the orange wire. The blue wire is fed through the buttons, so whilst they're not depressed, there is no full current. Not sure, don't understand. However, running my finger on there, not getting electrocuted. If it was, maybe it was just the bird edge, it felt like it. Secondly, I now have all the points working. So they're now fully working. Some of the issues I was having with the loco as it transfers, particularly here, traversing through this point work, is it would stall. And I think there was 2 issues. The point blades, partly because probably I've reduced the tension on the spring, aren't quite connecting to the side. So this one, again, I put a very tiny amount of solder on there. It did come out a little big and I've had to file it down and just cut it back. Because obviously if you have too much solder on there, it's just going to derail the train. So it's about a fraction of a millimetre out now. However, it works. I've replaced some of the insulated joiners with metal ones just to improve the track connectivity. And I can now demonstrate. No, I can't, because it's going to go in the sliding. Now I'll demonstrate. I can run the loco through the layout. And I knew it would do that. Okay, I need to go look back at that bit, but it did work before the camera goes on. But anyone who films model railway videos knows how this works. They work off camera and not on camera. However, I'm satisfied now with the track, so I can continue with the scenery and build the rest of the hill above the fiddle yard. So I've started working on the back hill. I've built a foam board skeleton for the basis of the structure, and as you can see, I've just got a little bit there propping this church up at the moment. I'm going to use the Celotex to build up the remainder of the scenery, and then just sort of shape it with plaster cloth and sculpted mould just to give it the finishing look. So the foam board's now in place, just waiting for the glue to dry, and then I'm going to start cutting the Celotex to fit into the shape of the formers and take it from there. So after a horrendous amount of mess making, I've now built the mountain scene ready for shaping. So you can see the church is going to go out here. I think the church is a little bit big, so I might have to chop it down a bit. And then where this van is, I'm going to have a little cottage up here, or maybe two, just to sort of complete the scene. And yeah, as I say, I'm just going to cut this foam into shape now to give a more realistic look, rather than the current stepped Inca pyramid look it's got at the moment.
A few hours of chopping and cutting later, and I had this.
So I've hacked away at the foam at the back, just to sort of cut the hill into shape. As you can see, it sort of flows with the bottom hill. It was a bit difficult to sort of get this indent here, but I got there in the end, I think. Maybe that's still a bit too steep. But the next will be add a bit of plaster cloth and sculptor mould just to finish off the shape. Before I do any of that, though, I'm going to seal up any exposed foam board with some Mod Podge, just because there's going to be a lot of water with the plaster cloth and the sculptor mould. So, you know, any water that's going to get this foam board is just going to warp it out of shape, and it will probably ruin what it's taken quite a while to build. So that'll be the first job, and then I'll move on to moulding the hills. Now, before I start doing the plaster cloth and sculptor mould for the scenery, I had a few more bits to finish off on this layout. So firstly, I've now glued the hill to the baseboard, so that is now stuck in place. I've also added a bit of foam board here to complete the road, so that the road will go down here, there's a junction here, and it will either go up over the railway or underneath the railway in opposite directions. And the other bit I now need to do is the riverbed. So what I'm going to do with the riverbed is I've got some foam boards, just the scraps that have been left over from this build, and I just put them underneath, trace round what I've cut out for the riverbed, and then cut them to shape. For this depth, 2 pieces of foam board is sufficient enough to then support the base, which is a larger piece of foam board, which I'll then slot between the wooden battens and glue underneath. And then I'll go over with some sculptor mould and then seal this all up before I attempt any sort of water on there, because I don't want it leaking, anything like that. So that's what I'm going to get on with now. Work my way across there, and then hopefully I can then start doing the scenery with the plaster cloth, etc., and getting this to look a bit more like a landscape. So as you can see, the river is now in place. I solved the problem of the floating bridge pier. I brought the riverbank out a little bit here, just so that's not floating in midair as it was before. Now originally the river was just going to flow through the scene, but I've been thinking about having a waterfall somewhere on the layout. I wasn't quite sure where to put it on the mountain range. I hadn't really got anywhere steep enough for it. So I decided just to raise the foam board here, and rather than have the sort of 2 extra pieces to lower it down to the level I'd cut in the woodwork, I'll just have it higher up, and I'm going to have a little weir here, just for a bit of scenic interest really. So there we are, that's the river basin. And as I pan out, that is now the layout pretty much built up. I need to put some board around the edge just to tidy it up a bit. I've still got to do around these sidings here. You can see this one's floating in midair. But again, I'm going to build a sort of wooden structure just to sort of support that siding, just to hold it up. It's built into the bank a little bit. So yeah, that's where we are. So I think I'm going to call it a day on this video. You can tell it's taken several weeks to get to this stage of the layout by the fact that every time I appear on the screen I've got a different top on. Haven't really stuck to any continuity there. However, I'm happy with how far I've got. It's looking good. I'm now going to research into how to do rock faces. I still haven't quite decided where the layout's going to be based, but I'm definitely thinking more than likely North Wales. So I'll probably need to look at slate mountain sides and rock faces, how to model that. Still not quite decided what's going to be here. I did do an Instagram vote some time back now. Any of you that follow me on Instagram voted for a loading area rather than an unloading area. So I've got to think what I'm now going to have here. I did think about having a dock at one point, but it's higher than the river, so that doesn't quite work. However, I've got this lovely Ruston, which I think can be quite nice on the scene, just there for loading up some wagons. I've just got to now work out what is loading into the wagons. Anyway, that'll be for next time. I'll start the scenery, and we'll start working out where everything's going to go on the layout.
Next time, I make some mess, destroy a church, make some more mess, do a spot of painting, and make a bit more mess.
If you enjoyed the video, well, thanks for watching. Please like, and if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. You know, it's nice to know that people do want to see my content. And thanks for watching.